BoomBox Union. Written by Andre Knight II. Okay. Said it. In the year 1620, the New World was visited by a mysterious race of beings. These beings abducted nearly all of the people, being used as chattel slaves at this time, and planted them in a new galaxy. Upon arrival, the niggas, as so called by their previous masters, distinguished themselves, forming a societal structure that would consist of two groups. There were those among them who could read and write, blessed with the desire to learn new things, innovate, invent, and teach. Those niggas became the first Getits. There were also those that could not read and write, blessed with size, speed, strength, agility, and durability. Those niggas became the Getits. For the next 243 years, Getits and Getits worked together to solve the problems of their new home. Getits learning from Getits and Getits depending on Getits for daily labor and security. That all changed when the host finally revealed themselves. In 1863, appearing as beings of light, the host granted the niggas 2 gifts each. The Getits were gifted tones and pieces of technology to tinker with. The Getits were gifted the ability to talk without talking and to move without muscle. It was learned that the host could not understand or form the words of our language. Instead, they chose to communicate mind to mind. They called themselves Arulian, and they were old. An eon ago, they left their home to seed the galaxy with life. However, some time ago, due to constant travel and evolution, their forms had become unable to reproduce and their ability to interact with the physical universe was beginning to wane. Still, having the desire to see and nurture new worlds, they did the next best thing. They would appropriate beings from across their former worlds to continue the great work. In fact, the niggas had been chosen for this very reason. Not only that, but it was also something to do with the skin they were in. Something about this solar system reacting to something the host called melanin, and them having the most. After their brief introduction, the Arulians were gone, disappearing as suddenly as they materialized, leaving the planet and the niggas to ponder. Some things happened. The Getits immediately began aggressively employing their talents to master Arulian technology, hoping to bridge their growing civilization with that of their saviors through science and scholarship. Galvanizing a large number of the Getit population, a political structure was formed, expansionist in nature. They began referring to themselves as the nation. Despite their natural size and strength, the Getits were a docile people, choosing to show their gratitude by dedicating their lives to the path. A spiritual belief based around the idea that through the honing of the body and mind, an individual may hope to one day commune with the Arulians through ascension. Out of the Getits and Getits, a special committee of 6 was formed to formally try to exchange gifts. The Getit nation decided that they would use every resource to study the physical and mental abilities of the Getits. In exchange, the Getits would be given access to some of the esoteric knowledge that the tomes possessed. After a time, it was agreed upon, and became a known fact that certain gifts of the Getits could not be learned by the Getits. However, the Getits did have the ability to grasp Arulian teachings, though not instinctively like the Getits. It was decided then that the Getit nation would establish universities to teach everyone, Getit and Getit alike. In 1931, a major issue arose between the nation and the Getit collective. The nation required more land and resources to continue their expansion. However, the Getit collective was closely tied to the land and viewed it as sacred. To allow any more of it to be given up, expanding the growth of that bottomless pit called progress would be akin to sacrilege. Mass protests were staged to halt the advancements of the nation's urbana. Begrudgingly, the nation agreed to stop their expansion efforts on the planet and began looking toward the stars. By 1950, the Getit nation, with the help of the Getit collective, succeeded in colonizing the nearest planet. Naming this new world Aurelia, they would also take the time to name their home world, in honor of the partnership that allowed them to make it this far. That is how planet culture got its name. A portion of Getits began to make the transition to the new world. The prospect of further space exploration and other new worlds excited them. They were expansionists after all. It was decided that the planetary development of culture would be left to the Getits. In exchange, the Getits would continue to provide the Getits with three things: trade, service, and aid if needed. The chiefs of the Getit collective agreed. The collective would maintain and control 75% of planet culture, as the other 25% had already been consumed by the sprawling metroplex known as Urbana. This land would be called free. In exchange, the collective would provide trade, service, and aid if necessary. Everything seemed settled, and for a time, the world seemed right. However, 8 years later, in 1968, tensions began to run high again. There were some Getits who remained amazed at the physical feats the Getits displayed and sought to maintain their natural partnership with them. But there were also those among the Getit who hated the Getits. They viewed them all as primitive, backward, lowly, dirty religious fanatics. Some even went so far as to call them unnatural. By now those Getits felt, collectively, like they got the short end of the stick. Also happening at this time, at a particular university, a professor was disbarred because the Getit students could not learn the path techniques. A protest followed. Extremist groups rose on each side. Soon after that, the leaders of the Getit nation and the chiefs of the Getit collective had a meeting. It was decided that peace would be maintained at all costs for the benefit of all peoples. However, the leaders of the Getit nation never returned. The Culture War. This would begin the first conflict of the age. History would later call this the Culture War. Mobilizing in just under 2 weeks, the Getit nation demanded recompense and swiftly moved to invade the free and occupy several Getit settlements. Shock and awe helped the Getits lay waste to 40 of the smaller settlements in no time, killing everyone, man, woman, and child. A faction of the extremist group, Unfolding, working within the government and military of the Getit nation, had used this opportunity to deploy devastating weaponry. Work on this technology began 20 years earlier. Truthfully, the seeds for it took root the day the Getits realized they would never be able to naturally reproduce the gifts given to the Getits by the Aurelians. However, as peace presided over the lands, and the leadership of the nation went through several changes and ideological shifts, work on this particular technology ceased. However, interest was reignited during the colonization of Aurelia. It was pitched to the nation's council as a means to be self-sufficient in space during exploration. Development of this technology was the most well-kept secret in the nation. Only a handful of top-ranking officials even knew about the program's existence. The knowledge and research gave birth to 2 separate paths of development. The first were biosymbiotic machines. These machines could take on a variety of forms, depending on the user's will. Everything from tools to equipment could be created nearly instantaneously with this new technology. On top of that, the Getits had also used their understanding of Aurelian technology and texts to master sound. This mastery culminated in the form of weapon frequencies. These frequencies could be used to create various effects. Shields could be produced by layering sound. The sound could also be directed in a beam toward a target, causing everything from hallucinations to liquefaction. These sonic weapons, in conjunction with the biosymbiotic machines, were collectively referred to as Project Mindframe. In the face of such an overwhelming force, the Getit nation hoped that the swift, decisive, and brutal nature of the attacks would be enough to force the Getits into submission. Boy, were they wrong. One by one, the villages started to go dark. When the reports finally began to come in, the Getits couldn't believe what they were hearing. Apparently, their command structure had broken down. This happened a mere 2 days after the initial assault. It was the result of officers ordering their subordinates to fire on the enemy, which, it turned out, were themselves. The extremist group within the Getit collective called themselves the League. They believed in defense with the same passion they had for the path. However, their disposition and demeanor differed from their fellow Getits. While one focused on inner stability and self-control, the other, the League, focused on manifestation and application. By weaponizing their gift of talking without talking, the members of the League had developed a terrifying technique. Reaching into the mind, they could force a person to see illusions, hear voices, and in some cases outright possess their intended target. This, combined with their other talents, made them the things of Getit nightmares. At the end of the first engagement, all the nation had managed to do was eliminate a large portion of the pacifist Getit collective, forcing more of the youth to subscribe to the League's way of thinking. The young Getit started calling Getits poppers, short for head poppers, and the gap between the nation and the League continued to expand. By 1970, the Getit League had grown so large, it had to split into quadrants to maintain the new lands they had acquired. With that, came a new social structure. Being able to speak without speaking allowed them to organize at a frightening pace. The League would be the central government, making laws and policies to govern the people. Each quadrant would be responsible for forming squads. These squads would be responsible for maintaining order. Each squad would be made up of 10 smaller units called crews. Members were scouted early and selected based on their skills and performance. Placed into specialized groups, young Getits were encouraged to pick a lane. That is how the 5 subclasses came to be. First, the mind controllers became known as MCs. Using the way of talking without talking. The MC specialized in painting pictures in the mind, using various rhyme patterns. This was called flowing or spitting the way, trapping an opponent in what they called bars. They could manifest an endless dimension where they were the masters. Second, using the way of moving without moving, the breakers specialized in physical manipulation of the environment. Using battle meditation and a series of movements known as dancing the way, a breaker could augment their natural psychokinesis with whatever they summoned through motion, imagination, and sheer force of will. In some cases, breakers were known to break space and time while dancing the way. Hence, the name. Third, there were the bombers. Besides specializing in espionage and guerrilla tactics, they all had a high affinity for visual art, premonition, precognition, and innovation. Using tags and pieces, they would paint or bomb the way. They were the heart and inspiration of their crews. Next, there were the boom-baps. Using a technique they called boxing the way, they would force waves of psionic pressure at an opponent or object, causing it to vibrate or explode. They were especially good at taking out large machines and armored weapons. Last, but not least, the Director of Justice, otherwise known as the DJ. Most DJs started out in another lane and were promoted into the position. The DJ operated on a high-level mental network that stretched vast distances and usually functioned in a command capacity. The DJ was responsible for training and coordinating the members of a crew while on mission. They had full autonomy when in the field. Using their way of the mix, a DJ would bend space and time to take control of a battle by feeling the rhythm of the fight. The DJ could remix it, if necessary, teleporting assets in or out of the mix with the flick of the wrist. Just one of these types of individuals was nearly impossible to best in combat. But, when combined, the DJ, MC, breaker, bomber, and boom bap were collectively known as a set, aka the cypher, and the cypher was unbeatable. Each crew held 2 sets, which meant the entire fighting power of the Getit nation resided in an impressive 400 individual combatants. That is, until the last cypher of 1979. The end. Tro.